My name is Eva Dixon. I'm an Australian artist working in London. I make paintings from found materials that sort of sit on sculpture and a heap of other practices, whether that's like metal or fabric. I used to get sent to these art classes at Maitland Regional Art Gallery, which is quite near where I'm from. And my mum sent me over the equivalent of our summer holidays. And I loved it. I remembered loving it because I found school quite difficult, and it was one of the few things that seemed to come naturally. And I think with time I realized my love of it wasn't just that I could do it well, it was also that I found it really expansive and exciting. I think making work is, for me, very impulsive, and I think for a lot of people this is sort of a somewhat universal thing. I have a need to make things, so it doesn't always feel like a choice. But I think when you want to do something difficult, you may as well do it well. And I think if you dedicate yourself to making things, there's sort of like almost a pride and such that you have to take in making that. So for me, there's that, but it's also that making work is one of the few times where, like with my ADHD, it doesn't affect me at all. Like I can be in my own head because my studio becomes like a representation of walking around my thoughts, which is really freeing when most environments I'm in don't allow me to behave in what feels like most natural for me. I think for me, I always think about stuff like that through making. So most of my ideas, methodology, everything is through the action of making. So there's not a lot of sitting down and thinking. My dad built a lot of the houses we lived in, so I was always spending time with him, convinced I had also built the house and that it wasn't him, it was me. Working on these projects with him, and I had like free range in the garage, and I put a lot of holes in our tires because I was leaving nails and screws out, and I thought it was the most wonderful thing. So that's sort of the way in which I sort of kept making work, and I still think that way now. Like when I'm in here or making work, I often think about performing the roles of different trades. So I try not to think too much as like someone who has the luxury of being in a studio. I try to have the same dedication as someone like showing up to a 9 to 5. Yeah. When I moved to England, I'd finished high school in South Africa, and I didn't really know you could go to uni for art. And my family didn't go to uni. Like my dad did a master's at like 47, but I'd graduated by then, which is brilliant. But it was just sort of, and I'm the eldest as well, so I didn't really know you could go to art school. Ended up at Central St. Martin's in this new city, and foundation was really effective in tearing down any thought that I had learned in high school about art making. And it was so like discombobulating for me. I had no idea what I was doing. And I had these really brilliant tutors like Hannah Brown, who had spent all of this time with me, encouraging me to make things that weren't like traditional painting. And through that, I think I realized they weren't the rules that I'd sort of built upon or been operating within in high school. And that was like radicalized me to some degree. And I found like this love for installation and just the act of making and the joy of making, because I feel very serious about things being fun. Like it should be enjoyable for me anyway to make work, and this idea of like the tortured artist who's constantly struggling, I really resent. So I think university was excellent at me opening that up. And then through my degree, I just felt like that kept sort of happening for me, and I had this desire to keep making work and showing that work, and that sort of has just propelled me post-graduation. Sometimes the best like readings of my work come from people outside of the art industry. Like my last show, this complete geezer, it was on a boat, and he was walking along the canal, and he was sort of staring at it, and I was like, you can come on. He was like, do I have to pay? And I was like, no, please just come on. And we had this chat, and he was on something, like a lot of something. So he stood in there for like 40 minutes looking at the work, which was longer than the people who like bought it. So it's like the most amazing thing. And he came out and he's like, so do you think that the work is like, what do you think? Is there such thing as like hypermasculinity? And they had all of these thoughts that I could not answer, and I thought it was the most wonderful conversation. And none of it really made sense, but it was he got something out of that show that I otherwise never would have sort of, like the receiving of that is what dictates the work. Like I know when the show opens next week, suddenly it will make sense to me, but right now, it's just a lot of things I've been thinking about, because this show specifically is something I've been researching for years, because Mercury 13, they were 13 real women that in the late 50s and early 60s all qualified to do the same astronaut testing as the first 7 astronauts that NASA hired. but they were never allowed to go to space because NASA didn't see a place for women in space, and actually made some jokes about it would be, you know, we don't need to eat in space, so why would we need them? And had John Glenn at the time stand in like court and say that there was no reason for women to be in space travel. And these 13 women, like some of them went through divorces, they had to leave abusive husbands, they lost jobs just because they wanted to do this testing. And I think there's something so profound about the dedication they each had. So my work doesn't often have really distinctive messages, but this show is in celebration of a woman called Wally Funk, who did go to space, the oldest person who ever went to space in 2021 with Virgin Galactic. But she has been trying to go to space since she was like in her early 20s, I think, and she's now like 86 and lives in Texas and spent her whole life wishing to do this. Like her TVs in her house, one played a launch and the other also played a launch, so the only thing she ever had on television was like related to space exploration. So I wouldn't say the work often has many messages in that regard, but I was really interested in bringing together like non-histories and presenting them as if she had gone to space. In a really literal sense, and I say this to people all the time, I really want a dog, and the reason I don't have a dog right now is that my partner made me promise when I was like 20 that we wouldn't get a dog until we had a mortgage. So every time I sell artwork, it goes into the dog fund. That's honestly my biggest goal. I really want to do something institutionally. I'd love to do some stuff overseas. Like I really want to do some things in the States. But if I'm making work that I'm really proud of, that brings me joy and opens up interesting dialogue with other artists, and I'm showing alongside artists I'm engaged with, when I'm old and I can afford to be in the studio more often than not, I would say I have done it. That's the thing I'm trying to do. I just want to make really good work, and I want nothing I've made now to be the best work I've made. I want everything to only be better. So if I'm like, you don't retire from being an artist, but if that's what I'm doing forever, I think that is like the ultimate goal for me. I think some of the things I wish I'd known was that it actually doesn't matter that much. I'm very serious about this. It's not to say it isn't important, but I used to think that the justification you had for making work was incredibly essential to making it. And so through my first and second year of uni, I just remember thinking, oh God, like I haven't thought this thing out. And then I had this tutor, Dan Howard Burt, say one day, Eva, it doesn't matter. Just because you're thinking it doesn't mean we can see it. And that was the most profound thing. It's something about the way he said it. It was the only tutorial where I ever cried as well, but something about the way he said that everything just made sense. So for me, there was that. But also, I always feel like I'm in a rush. I still feel like this now, but I'm starting to realize as I get a little bit older that there is time and the career is a long one. And it's easy to want things so quickly when there's a massive rise at the moment of emerging artists, really young emerging artists being skyrocketed into blue chip galleries, but that isn't necessarily the best way, because it's the work you're making and the people that you choose to engage with it matter a lot more. I think if you're looking to go to art school, I actually work for a university, so this is not a pitch from the uni, but what you get out of art school is the effort you put in, and people have this idea that everything will be catered for, but in the UK anyway, that is certainly not the case. So if you show up and you engage, the tutors will give you more time than they're allocated, the technicians will give you more time than they're allocated. Nothing is given to you, it's in no industry, but especially in the art industry. And it's also just like making a decision to study is really pushed upon young people as if it's a necessity, but sometimes time is key. I've always felt like I had to go directly back to back into education, but the mature students I have are the most connected to the course because they know what they're paying for and they know what they want out of it. So taking that time to think about why you want to do it is all a part of it, but it's also just that the ideas you have are nurtured at university, so it's a really great place to fail. And any student that comes in who has a really firm idea about their practice, and normally the students I always worry about the most, because disassembling that is the goal. We want to break it apart, because if you left making what you arrived making, you've kind of failed the course in a way. So it's this really wonderful period where everything can be fucked up. Everything can be a fuck up, and it should be. Yeah. Working with your hands is such a joy. There's something wonderful about thinking through tactility or thinking through making. And I think that I can't imagine making work any other way, and I almost can't explain the action of making work any other way. there's also just a profound joy in trying to figure out how something works, or the inability to. Like, my work is propelled by the fact I don't understand it. And when I start to understand what I'm making, I become really disinterested. So the yellow work here actually is the first work I ever made that was remotely related to this in like the beginning of 2022. So I've kept that work knowing I wanted it for a show, still not really understanding it now, and that's sort of where the joy is for me. So whenever I've had to fabricate my own work for a show, I've been really disinterested, but there's so much excitement in not knowing what's happening. Like, there's so much possibility in making that I don't really think there's anything else to do but that. I often say, just because you're thinking it doesn't mean we can see it, in nicer words. Half the time I feel like all students really need to hear is that things will be okay. And they will. Like, that expression, like, you know, it will become okay because it's not done until it is, you know. And with students, you're at such a vulnerable point in your career as an artist, like at that beginning point, that I think they really just need to be nurtured. So it doesn't always matter what I say about the work. It matters a lot more about how they feel about themselves, because the confidence within yourself allows you to make the good work, and young people never arrive with that, really. How can you expect them to? When I was 21 or so, I was on a work placement year, and I started working as an assistant teacher for the National Saturday Club, which is a free arts education for disadvantaged students, and it was amazing. I'd always liked working with, I don't really like children, but I love teenagers. So they're sometimes like quite complicated young people that have gone through a lot, the students we were working with. And there's something really profound about knowing you've made someone's experience of education a little bit easier or a little bit more comfortable, especially like I never really had a gay teacher in school, but being able to be that for some students, although small, even me talking about my partner, you can tell the difference it makes for some students. And besides the education part itself, knowing that they will see people that are like them in the world, that are trying to be or are beginning to be successful, I think is sometimes the best thing I can give them. So that is probably the thing I love about it. There's something so privileged about contributing to someone's education and encouraging them to do something that they don't feel brave enough to do. The art world I always think is a bit Victorian, like in comparison to other industries, it's archaic. But you know, I think I insert myself in so many conversations, and I go to multiple openings a week, and I'm rocking up with those business cards. Like I'm really quite serious about getting myself in rooms. So you get told some crazy stuff. Like I've had, and now pretty successful artists come up to me and say, well, if you're having these people say, you know, these things about your work, because a lot of people will assume my work is made by a man, I think because it involves like somewhat, like it's handy. I had this guy come up and go, well, if you're having these issues, why don't you just pretend that you're a man online? So a lot of it's just sort of skirted around. But in saying that, I would actually say me like being a lesbian is a bigger thing in the art world. But in saying that, I was in a show 2 years ago with some other queer people that was curated by Gemma Rolls-Bentley, who's like this brilliant author and curator. And that gave me this community of people in the arts world that were like me. So although it is like, there's a negative there, like it is really difficult being a woman in any space, there is something so profound about having a community of people that are alike to you. So in saying that, I've kind of found the art world very difficult and incredibly joyful, because I'm surrounded by people who have a reading of my work that resonates with me. I am at a point now where people call me about stuff. Like I had a book come out a couple of years ago, and my nan read it. I think she's the only person who read it start to finish, because it was like a coffee table book. And so I came home recently, and she'd collected all of my great-grandmother's spools that were these beautiful timber spools. So my nan gives me a lot of stuff. There's actually things in the show that I think are from her house. Like the fabric in this work is from the op shop, like a charity shop near my nan's house. and the carpet tacks that are on the side, because these are inverted carpet tacks which are used to hold carpet in place. I've flipped all of the nails and reinserted them, so they're just a material that otherwise is quite common and, you know, of making, but as a material, I think that it's incredibly beautiful. A lot of it's eBay as well, so the ratchet straps on this work are from eBay, but finding ratchet straps that are no longer suitable for purpose and dirty is actually quite hard, because people automatically bin them and they're not load safe, so you can't use them for work anymore. So they're kind of a hard one to find, but they get very specific. This postcard is from the Kennedy Space Station when I went in 2016, which was, actually maybe it was even 2015, which was the most amazing thing ever. And at Kennedy Space Station, if you do the full tour, there's a little secondhand charity shop that's out near the launch pads that you can only access on the tour, run by some retirees, and it's from a set of 1960s postcards from the moon landing. I think they came out in '69, and I've had them in a couple of pieces of work, and I think they're the most amazing thing. So these are from a fishing lure. I think I bought them in Mallorca last year. The metal tape, I might have bought it from the hardware store, and then so all the materials I find sort of come from vastly different areas and sort of culminate, I suppose, in my studio. This work, Atlas, which is made of maps, I bought those maps in foundation or first year of uni. I had no idea what they were for. I didn't know what to do with them, but I thought they were just incredible. And I'd always been fascinated with the fact they're cloth backed. So if you look at them up close, they have this amazing weave, which you don't really find in maps now because it costs more. There's a manual labor element. And I think they're beautiful. And I'm just thinking when I look at them of someone laying them out on a table and applying this linen or cotton backing manually to strips and strips of maps is beautiful. And the bag at the bottom, this material here, is a sailing bag. So a sail came in this bag, and I have a piece of work I made last year from a boat sail. And that's from that. So I've sort of just pieced those pieces together. With building the command module, I love the idea of a DIY approach to going to space. So I have an impact driver, so a drill that has the hammer mode on it. And so building this was just this process of gunning stuff together very aggressively. But there's something wonderful about making something and just doing the thing, which is how that sort of came to be. And I stole some road signs when they were just sort of conveniently left on the side of the road. Somewhat illegally, and I called the antenna across the road from the studio. There's an antenna world. I don't know what they make. I think they make dishes for televisions. I called them because they had these spools in their bin. So a couple of days ago, I grabbed them because I knew I needed to make this post. So it's sort of just around. I emailed Islington Fire Department in July this year, I think, and I was on a bus in South London, and my partner was like, "Are you really going to email the fire department about this?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah, I am." Emailed them, and the commander for Islington Fire Department emailed me back and invited me on this tour, and I thought I was going to go there and he'd give me these hoses, but we got to go down the pole and drive in the truck and fire the hose, and I got to wear all the gear and play with the jaws of life. It was one of the coolest things I've ever done. It was really quite magical, and that's what these are made from. So this is probably the heaviest work I've ever made, and one of the most technically, well, at least laborious, because to cut hose is made of 3 layers. So you have a plastic section, a cotton section, and another plastic layer, and it's a couple of mil to cut through. So it's quite a lot of work to cut. So I was sitting on the floor cutting it with a draw knife. And the cables that come from this are from, weirdly, my childhood computer, because when I was at my nan's house, she really wanted it gotten rid of. So I took the hard drive out of this tower and found these incredible cables that said master and slave on them, which is the terminology they use in computer making, or whatever you'd call it, for where the cabling is running between different systems. Yeah, that's where those materials came from. I've gone around the corner, there's this hardware store that's been there for 50 years. I just think there's something wonderful about that. And I bought my stainless steel cable ties from them yesterday, and the pipe clamps that are holding that work to the scaffolding. So it's sort of, I think things find me. A lot of the work is sort of like that. The frame on this orange work is from a badminton racket. So early badminton rackets had to be pressed, otherwise they'd warp, because now you get composite timber, so you don't get warping. But this they were used to prevent warping. So if you imagine two of that shape pressed together over the racket, it's quite interesting. I think they're great. They're like ready-made stretchers. So I had a work on that I made in 2023 and it sucked. So when I was going through my stuff, I will often reuse those frames. So the writing on the front of the work is from a piece of work I made a couple of years ago. So I gut that work, throw the stretcher back in the pile, and then when the right thing is beginning to be made, I fish the stretcher back out because I often do all of this woodworking in advance. So I have like 10 or 15 stretchers on the go with nothing on them, or lots of layers of fabric that I've cut off that isn't working. So there's like a buildup of material on this one, like around the side from the original work that was on there. And sometimes that doesn't happen because this is just directly on the work. At the moment, there's lots of metal glue in the work as well. So if there's a way to do something that's somewhat instantaneous and incorrect, I will do it. So I could have applied that with a lot of different glues, but why wouldn't I use metal glue if I had metal glue to stick a sticker to a blanket? Like, why wouldn't you do it, you know? Some of it's like, I can do it, so why wouldn't I? That's sort of how those things come together. The pins I also find on Vinted a lot as well. And if you spend enough time on Vinted and eBay, your results get very weird. So that's been quite helpful in me making the work. I get a lot of specialized recommendations, so it becomes quite easy now. I'm always collecting stuff, so if it's not for this show, like I have like 30 G-clamps, so I'm buying those G-clamps all the time, I'm finding them, they sort of compile together. I had this lecture, I've actually spoken to her about it since. There's this really brilliant woman who used to work at CSM, Caroline List, and she ran this workshop called like a painting department, so she just specialized in surfaces, and there's no one I've met who knows near as much about painting as this woman. She gave this lecture on Sigma Polk, and I'd been trying to figure out how photography could sort of be used in a way that didn't just, people have this tendency when you look at an image to go, oh, I know that person. So you're always looking at the subject as opposed to the photograph as an object, which I think is one of the reasons why people never treat photography near as seriously as other forms of art. So anyway, at the time I was taking these images, and there's a very famous image by Catherine Opie that's of the back of her head that I think is carved in, it's like cut into her skin, it says Dyke, and I thought it was like the most beautiful self-portrait I'd ever seen. And during COVID, I had been taking these images of myself because I was alone. So I took this image of myself like when I was 21 or so, and then 12 months later ended up putting it onto this work by screen printing onto it once I'd already stretched it, which is why you have these sort of blank areas where the print hasn't come through, and the paint that's under here where it appears to be white is radiator paint. So radiator paint, I don't work with a lot, but it has this sort of mild gloss and it's heat resistant. And there's something that excited me about seeing it in the store, so I haven't since actually put paint on anything. Made that, and then I was sewing the piece together, and I'd kept it knowing that I wanted to have it in a show for some time and never quite knowing what that would be. And I knew that if I had this show, specifically the Mercury 13, that it would be the right place to show it. Because with every show I do, I sort of insert myself into some narrative. Like my last show, I was thinking a lot about football, so that was sort of the thing I was becoming in a way. So with this show, I like to think that if I've sort of faux historically sent Wally Funk to space, I in some ways have become akin to an astronaut through the process of doing that. I was obsessed with military grade ripstop nylon at the time, and this is what that is made of. So it's supposed to be, it's very hard to get a rip in, as the name suggests, but in truth it's whatever's produced for the military is whoever won the bid with the lowest cost production item. So that's where ripstop came in, and I've been fascinated about how people buy things that are quote unquote military grade or surplus thinking that they're super high quality, but they're just the lowest cost production possible, which I've always found quite interesting. Scaffolding I love because it's supposed to be temporary. Like you see these buildings covered in scaffolding and they become like temporary sites of labor where people arrive, they do work, and then this infrastructure, this real structure is removed so quickly, and they're designed to be quick. And I love the idea of having them within an exhibition because although the show is only a month long, there's something about treating scaffolding as mildly permanent, or maybe that allows the work to be read as something that is changing or will leave. Painting is always seen as such like such a state of permanence. You make something and it exists. The idea that something might change over time is really interesting to me. So having scaffolding is like a means to suggest that there is, like, it's a side of change, that things are evolving and moving forward is really interesting. But it's also just like everything's hung on a wall. There's something wonderful about hanging something in space or changing like the architectural environment that you're within. I knew I didn't want to work with the fact this has that bulkhead and these two niches, so the scaffolding felt like a really natural way to circumnavigate that problem. And I thought about renting it, but it turns out the building actually had scaffolding, so the moment I found that out, it was almost like, well, it has to be done because it feels like that's meant to be. These legs are actually supposed to come out at a 45, but naturally I haven't used them that way. So, because you can see from the base that they're meant to come out at an angle, and I haven't really used them that way. I've sort of jerry-rigged them together with a ratchet strap and a quick release clamp. So they're fine, they're stable, but it's all very DIY. But the idea of incorrectly using scaffolding is kind of funny to me as well. Like, I love it as a way of making, like doing something so instantly and so incorrectly that it becomes something different altogether. I also feel like a lot of work I look at is actually trade. Like, I'll be looking at people working in trade, building things. I'll just stop sometimes when there's construction on the side of the road and just watch. The way that I was working on this is that the frame that's on the inside here is one of the first frames I ever made when I was learning to build frames in my flat during my work placement year, because I didn't have access to the workshops. So it sucks in comparison to sort of like my skill set now. But then I had these leftover pieces of timber from a really cheap stretcher that had warped, so I cut them and reassembled it, so it's sort of like a frame within a frame. The internal text is from an Ilford light filter, which in a dark room, because you can only have like red light or orange light, they're a plate that covers the light fixture so it can be safe for developing film. And I figured out if you cut these light filters in half, they're actually made of two pieces of glass and a piece of like almost like velium that has Ilford light filter and the grade printed on it. So this is taken from that, because I have other works that are made with these light filters, but this is just using the internal text. And the front is plexi, and I think plexi is brilliant because it glows from the side. It's remarkable the way it bends light. It's like fiber optic almost. So if you try and cut plexiglass, it almost always chips. So that's sort of how this came to be, the work, but I quite enjoy that it has this characteristic of being forced together and taut and required to sort of stay. And these fixings are from Wakefield, which is a very, very old, how old would it be? It's 80-year-old hardware store in Walthamstow. So they're original thumb turn screws from when they used to use the imperial system in England. So that nothing is produced with that thread so much now. But I think they're just like beautiful aesthetically compared to a wing nut. They have these three ridges, and for a piece of hardware, there's something kind of erotic about it. I use weights. When I'm installing work, sometimes I use weights and pulleys to hold things up. But the pulley at the top of this is chandlery, so it's from boating. But it has this hook on the end to weight it down so that the pulley doesn't swing around. And I, in my studio, had this piece of concrete that didn't work from another project. And I thought, oh, well, I've got this pulley with this hook on it that I need to weigh down. And so I brought it in, and now it's here. So I don't really know whether it works, I don't know what it's doing, but I knew for now it needed to be there. And if I don't understand, if I don't feel like it does anything by Saturday, then it will go. But it means that if you're pulling on the pulley, it doesn't move, which makes it more stable. I cast it in a shopping bag. So that's why it sort of looks like that and has there's actually bits of plastic stuck in it I can't get rid of. But I think concrete is wonderful. It's something I haven't really worked with much, but I'm excited about.